Good morning. Welcome everybody. So, hi, beyond the crowds. So we've risen, we've soared, and now we're on a high. So from flying to drugs, I'm not too sure, but maybe Trevor. There's Trevor Carty as well. Let me admit him quickly. So yeah, talking about getting high above the crowds this morning. So who shall we start with this morning? So let's start with Jasper this morning.
Morning, you want me to start commenting?
Yeah, I want to see if I can get you high above the crowds this morning.
Just looking at the number of people on the program so far, we've certainly left the crowd behind. Yeah, I don't have too much to say because I think it's now getting to the point where we basically just now revisit it from different angles. But I think my off-the-cuff comment would be to say that don't find your wisdom in crowds. You know, just on the topic that you guys were busy with before we started, I personally have a huge distrust in any so-called government statistics of stuff happening, because I know we are being programmed to buy a certain narrative. And whether it's now COVID or whether it's the state of the economy or whether it's whatever. So if you then can't believe what you read in newspapers and you can't believe what a politician says, then where do you find your wisdom or thing? So yesterday we said higher and higher so that you can get a helicopter view and away from the noise. So yeah, I think it's just for me, whatever the crowd is doing, then it's a good chance that if you just do the opposite, you're probably in the right direction. So I think I would start with that, and maybe I'll do a comment later on, and then let's see what the other people contribute.
All right, good. Thanks. Thanks. Jasper, right. I think, Ed, let's get across to you then.
Yeah, I've been loving these discussions that have come out of Trevor's poem, because I think it's really interesting to hear other people's views on things. And yesterday we had your bubbles rising up out of the water, and I'd never thought of it in that aspect before. I was always like above sea level, and you were down below, and I thought it was really interesting. And then Trevor said yesterday he didn't put a little thought into the construction. He just woke up at 2:30 in the morning and wrote this down. And you know, it was just that I think the construction is perfect. And that might have happened by accident, but I doubt it. I think, you know, it was interesting that Trevor said he wrote it at 2:30 in the morning. Now I'm assuming he'd been asleep beforehand. I'm not sure he's a party animal. And therefore his subconscious was working. And our subconscious is much more powerful than our conscious. That's why I have all my great thoughts after a run, because when I'm running, my mind switches off. So that's why I think it's so well constructed, because it was been brewing in Trevor's vat for quite some time, and then it just distilled down overnight. And I think, you know, you can think of a poem as a condensed story, you know, perhaps like a broth that's been reduced down to a stock cube, and then when we add the water, we get the flavor. And I'm looking at Trevor's poem as a dehydrated smorgasbord, and that our thoughts and our ideas and our images, and I think that one of the bubbles is a very powerful image. You know, that's us dehydrating it and turning it back into a big meal. And like a story, a poem needs pace. You can't keep the same pace all the time. You've got to stop for a little bit of a breath, a little bit of a breather. And that's what I think Trevor's done with this line. You know, high above the crowd. He's given us that time because, you know, high is a kind of nice peaceful thing. Crowds are loud, noisy, you get jostled. I don't like being in a crowd. you get dragged along by the crowd, pushed along by the crowd. So I think, Jasper's quite right. Don't find wisdom in crowds because you get pulled along by them. So this high gave us some time to just stop and have a period of reflection, to pause, a bit of stability, a bit of rest. And of course, you're looking down on what's going on. You're totally removed from it. And I think high also has positive images. We talk about, the high ground. We talk about high achievers. So it's a very positive thing to have. And it was quite interesting. I was talking to someone yesterday who runs a very successful company. It's an award-winning company and a company that's held up in high regard. And she was saying that COVID has given her the chance to stop, to stand back from what's going on, to look at the company and think, well, why are we doing that? Well, that's a waste of time. Well, hang on a minute, we should be doing that. And I think, her sort of image of standing back is the same as the high, looking down, and you've got no noise, no crowds, no disturbance. You can look down and think, what should I be doing? And I think that's what we should be doing during COVID, taking the COVID pause to reflect and think, well, we've been so busy working in our businesses, we haven't worked on our businesses. So while we're sort of looking down from a high, and away from the crowds, away from people pushing us in a certain direction, away from people hurrying us up, just taking that bit of time to reflect and see what we can change. And if an award-winning company can think that way, then surely we can think that way as well. So those are my thoughts.
Great, thanks, Ed. Yeah, always good thoughts and interesting insights into it. One of the other images that sort of came to my mind as you were talking there, and it sort of came up a bit yesterday as well when we were reflecting on where we were going to head today was the old analogy of crabs in a bucket. And they say when one of the crabs tries to escape from the bucket, all the rest reach up and pull him back. And that's sort of what happens in the crowd situation as well, isn't it? You're always getting, as you say, jostled and knocked around and pushed in directions perhaps that you don't necessarily want to go in, just simply because there isn't space to move in the direction you do want to go in. So to get above that and be able to gain that perspective and that stillness and that clarity of vision that the height, I think, gives you is a great one for me as well. So good. Donovan, let's get across to you next.
Thanks, Ivan. Morning, everyone, again. Yeah, I just had two thoughts. One is when you use those words, higher than or beyond the crowds, meaning you comparing yourself and you want to place or ideally want to be placed at a higher level than the crowds. So meaning you want to be better than them, or you want to exceed them or excel, to find yourself in a space that's almost beyond their reach. And then the other one is high, as in, when people get influenced with some substances, they normally refer to it as being high. So one might tend to think that, being higher is you find yourselves in your own world or in a different space than everyone else. So you're on your own, you're in your dream space or in your dream world. So yeah, that's it from my side. Thanks.
Good, thanks, Donovan. Right, Trevor Carty, welcome back. We've been missing you these last couple of days.
Morning, Ivan.
And you see you from your nose up at the moment because you're lying on your back again.
I'm in my study, as you can see. I want to focus on the word beyond. So high, beyond the crowd. So let's just think about this situation. The world has called what we're in lockdown. Lockdown. I want to change the narrative. I want to change the word lockdown to cocooning. Because I'm like Ed, I'm of the opinion that this cocooning period, where we have not been with the crowd, we have been beyond the crowd, has given us some time to reflect on exactly what it is that we do, and to work on our businesses and on our lives and on our visions and on all the other things that we just haven't had time to do because we were always in and in the crowd and low, lockdown. It's so if we change the narrative and we get the narrative into a transformation narrative, then beyond can take you away from where we are. So beyond is about what if. If we went beyond the walls of our minds, beyond the walls of our economy, beyond the wherever crowds are gathered. And Senegal last week was a perfectly good example. Well, this week, even small crowd can be a destructive crowd, and yet it just takes one individual to be higher than that crowd and to be beyond in terms of the way that they're thinking. So if we just change the narrative and use that beyond in a cocooning metaphor, then our thoughts are higher than the thoughts we had before. And as soon as you start higher in your thoughts than where they were previously, you start challenging your own spiritual realm and your own talents and giftings. And when you've got the amount of time that we've had in this lockdown, down implies negative, down implies low, while Trevor says high. So is this not lock high instead of lock down? Should that not be our new narrative? Should that not be the way that we work on our transformation in this time? I don't know, but it really has given me some time to go beyond what I've been comfortable with and beyond the crowd. It's just so cool. I've been away, Ivan, so I've been beyond the crowd. I've been isolating. I've been on my own. It's been fabulous. And that's when you can really get high, even like Donovan says. And that's also quite nice, just to get high on nature, high on the silence, and high on the ability to just lock high. So this has not been locked down. It's a cocooning. It's high, and it's beyond the crowd.
Great, thanks, Trevor. Yeah, and I agree. I think the ability to get out into nature, whether it's on a trail run or whether it's just sitting peacefully looking at a forest or some wildlife, gives you that ability just to free your mind. And I like your metaphor of cocooning, but I take it a step further because it's a metamorphosis process, isn't it? It takes you from one state to another state, and I think that's also given us, this lockdown process has given us the ability to actually metamorphosize as well. So I think that's some nice thoughts and ideas there as well. So great stuff. Cecile says she's struggling with technicians on site. So Cecile, if and when you're ready to pop in, let me know. But other than that, I'm going to pop across to Trevor now.
Right. So again, I'm just amazed at what this stimulates. So I'm loving the feedback and the interpretations that are coming in. I suppose just to make a couple of comments. I think taking this poem and relating it to the Senegal, I'll call it a debacle. But that would be, and also this factor that Trevor brings up. I mean, it's been an absolute pleasure and a privilege for us to actually sit back in COVID and have this time to think. But it's all relative, as is Senegal, all relative. That small group of people that were at Senegal were, for me, certainly not representative of just the upliftment that has taken place in our society since 25 years ago. But again, that comment is relative. That comment is made from a privileged position, from someone that's living in a township shack. They see it completely differently. And we have to be high enough to actually stay away from that negativity, but also to have the humility to understand what it would be like to be right down low there in the ground, under a little tin shack, maybe even a cardboard shack, which one spark of a paraffin stove just annihilates 250 living quarters for individuals. So we've got to be aware all the time of the relativity. And I think somewhere along the lines, I've got to write into that. So that just stimulated the privilege we have to cocoon. But now that is a warning, and also I hope an inspiration. Folks, if you're there in that, the little shack dwelling that I'm talking about, it's how do we move people up to the level of privilege where they can actually sit back and say, man, I've got the time to think, instead of being almost an animal instinct that I've got to survive. So it's second by second, I've got to look to see where I can get something just to survive. I've got kids and I've got a wife and all of that. So this thing of relativity really gets me. But I think when we get away from what is happening, we'll actually see that the globe has improved. And that's why I love watching the works of the Peter Diamanduses and the Ray Kurzweils, because it keeps you on a positive high, staying away from the negativity of these crowds. So you get, I don't know how many, couple of hundred people from one political faction, another couple of hundred people from another political faction, 20 people from that political faction, and they've all got vested interests, for goodness sake. We've got to stay away from that. Anyway, that's just a little rant that I wanted to put there, just to appreciate the privilege we have of taking the time to ponder, and then secondly, to try and get into the shoes of other individuals that don't have the privilege that we have, and what contribution can we make to actually uplifting them. Now, if I can add to that, I was watching a program, and the guy, what is his name? I think it's Simon Reeves. Edward, you might know him. He operates a travel program for the BBC. And I must have recorded it about 3 months ago. I recorded tons of stuff that I wanted to see. And what he did, he traveled all the major rivers of the world to see what influence was in today's time on those rivers with growing populations. And the third program was on in China, on the Yangtze. And he went through a couple of these unpronounceable Chinese names, and how just 20 to 25, 30 years ago, China was, and the average Chinese individual was desperately poor. And in 20 to 25 years, these guys have completely changed themselves. They built cities in under a year, and these individuals in these cities, despite being a communist country, have uplifted themselves to the levels where they can actually sit back and turn around and say, we want to go traveling the world. We want to go do these things. We've got to go and have a look at how did they blooming well do that? And how do they now see that they have the freedom to do these things within a communist structure? I'm just amazed by what I actually saw there in that particular program. It was episode 3 of Traveling the Rivers of the World. Please go and have a look at it and come back to me and tell me what your interpretation of that is. And then, Ed, I thought what I should do, just to give you some clarity, these were the notes. So, you know, I jumped up at 2:30. I put the kettle on, I quickly wrote a couple of the notes, and that's where I talk of quatrain. So I got that down, but it's certainly not in the order. I adjusted a couple, and one of the words you can see on the third line there somewhere, I wrote above, but I had above on the top line. So I changed that above to beyond so that I didn't have a repeat of a number. But then the giggle is, and listen, I don't write the best because I can't write. I then made myself a cup of tea, relaxed, switched off the lights and started thinking. And the other thoughts came to me that I should write some more sentences. So that was the original thing. Now you can see how the writing got worse and worse. And then I adjusted it when the light came up at about 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. So I thought I'd share that with you. What else are we? We're at 8:22. And if I may, Ivan, just stop me. I told you that the next day I wrote something more. So you can see that little piece of paper sits on my bed or next to me. And this is what I wrote. But I think this follow-up relates to, if I may, can I read it? Yes? Okay. I think this relates to many of the follow-up comments that have come from each of you on what that little first poem meant to you. So I did tell you that I gave it a title, Dream Extremes. I haven't typed it in here, but I'd like to just give us some more content. And it went like this: dream on, sweet dreamer, dream on. So you want to change the world while you sit on your tush. And I loved it because Trevor yesterday used the word tush. And you know, how do we have that synchronicity? I wonder. So let me repeat that. Dream on, sweet dreamer, dream on. So you want to change the world while you sit on your tush. You want to win the race while you hide in the bush. Dream on, sweet dreamer, dream on. Next verse. Dream big, big dreamer, dream big. So you want to reach the top while you give of your best. You want to share your view while you lift up the rest. Dream big, big dreamer, dream big. So I'm going to get that for Ed because I think that might relate, and he might have some fun with what those two different stanzas actually mean. It was Simon Reeves. I see you making that comment, but I think that second one relates a lot to the feedback of how people are interpreting that first poem. The second one will give further meaning to that, I believe.
Great, thanks, Trevor. Yeah, interesting stuff. So Jasper, I'm going to get back to you because you ducked and dived at the beginning of the session, so put you back on the spot now.
Yeah, I don't think we can really, well, I can really add more, but I was just, you know, that reality of when you're in a crowd, and I think all of us have found ourselves, whether it was at the, call it the fun park, I was at Disney World with my family way back, and when there's a large congregation of people, you almost lose control of your movement because the crowd jostles you. Now that's a friendly environment and you don't mind too much and you just slowly weave your way through the crowd. But, you know, those who are precious to you can get lost in the crowd. So if you're a father with a young child, you have to hang on to that child like crazy, because if you lose him within the space of a few meters, you could lose him because of the density of the crowd. Now, you add to it these political populist people who are drawn to these kind of explosive events like we had in Senegal, and they couldn't care what the results are. All they want is the publicity. And now you just find yourself at the wrong place at the wrong time, and you get caught up in the activities of that crowd. And the next moment, the police come in, and just to disperse the crowd, they might start battering you with, you know, weapons and stuff just to open up space. So for me, crowds are a very dangerous place to be. So if you have to check out what's happening, stay on the outskirts so that you can move fast. But it's almost, well, another analogy is then in everything we do, we hope that our thing will become the next crowd attractor. So what happens if you are becoming successful and the crowds are starting to follow you? What then? So then you have almost become that thing that you warn people against. Yet the economy is based on the fact that $1 a month by a million people, you know, that kind of thing. So so I think it's a bit of a just sensitizing us to say that it is the nature of man to be a crowd animal, wants to stay with the crowd, and there's protection in the crowd normally. But if you're a visionary, you can't create a vision from within the crowd. You have to be outside the crowd, and hopefully one by one they follow you. But then what if they all follow you and now they just tell you what you want to know instead to know? So yeah, so those are just thoughts that comes up in me when I think about the crowd situation.
Thanks, Jasper. Ed, I'd like to get back to you, just seeing that Trevor pointed to you in his little session there with his second poem, and maybe you've got some thoughts on that, and maybe you'd like to just wrap it up for us.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up what Jasper was saying about crowds and some of the notes that were going in the chat. And I think people listening to the recording obviously don't see the chat, so don't know what's going on. And there was a mention of wildebeest. And I just wondered whether there's a difference between a herd and a crowd, because you get much more protection in a herd than you do in a crowd, and there's perhaps more coherence in a crowd. And then when you think about, I don't know whether you guys use the word murmurations, when you get a whole flock of birds that are flying in formation. You know, there again, it's a protection thing and no one gets hurt. So I think there's a difference between crowds and herds. And I think that might be an interesting topic to explore. I didn't instantly like Trevor's second poem. The first one, the instant I saw it, I thought that was genius. The second one, I'm not so sure, but then again, the first one I read, and I much prefer reading stuff than hearing stuff. So it might be the fact that I heard it rather than read it. So I'm really looking forward to reading what Trevor's written rather than hearing it, because that's how I prefer to take my information in, is by reading. But I do think, yeah, this has been a really fascinating journey into discovering what people think about various different bits and pieces. I think we might struggle to do each line by line now, because some of the stuff has already come out beforehand, and it might be worth taking it as a couple of chunks. But I still think there's a lot to be picked out of this, so it might be worth maybe spending 2 more days on it before we move on to Trevor's second one.
Great, thanks, Ed. Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion. So yeah, so let's look at glide upon the winds, and look from afar at least, and perhaps even get to the next line to kick off on Monday. So I think it's all good. Otherwise, yeah, we can also. Yeah, just checking on Trevor's spelling there. I did a double take at first. Threw me for a little bit of a loop. I'm wondering what we're letting ourselves in for, letting these illiterates write poems for us, but we'll never find out unless we try. So yeah, I think on that note, folks, yeah, let's go forth and have a fantastic weekend, and hopefully you'll be above the crowds. Certainly, I'd prefer to be way above the crowds, but we'll see if we can glide through the weekend, and we'll see you on Monday morning. So have a great one. See you then. Cheers now.